This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. And if you could, please do me a favor and take a moment and leave a rating and review in whatever podcast player you're listening to this on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio. Doesn't matter. I would greatly appreciate it. And that feedback really helps get other listeners to the show. Also, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you feel so inclined, you can go to ageekleader.com/tip and donate to the show. Thanks so much. All right, Geek Leaders, today I'm honored to have Abigail Wen on the show. She's a New York Times bestselling author and the executive producer of a film on Netflix called Love in Taipei, which we're going to be talking about that, and her new book, which is coming out, I believe, the day this launches, The Vale. And it's all about AI and some really cool storylines behind that, which I think are pretty awesome. With all being said, Abigail, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, John. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, if you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about your background, how you got into writing, and why tech is important to you.
Absolutely. So I had no idea I was a writer, but when I look back on my life, I see it. As a kid, I was always telling stories to my brother and sister, and I read to myself every night before I went to sleep. I had all these stories. I loved the story. A lot of times the characters were my closest friends, and I read to explore other worlds. But I never read anything about the life that I knew, like the things that I was an expert in. I read books to learn about other people. I didn't know that to be a writer, you actually need to write about things that only you can write about and what you're an expert in. So for many years, I just didn't know. But I found that every time there was an open-ended assignment in school or even college or law school, I would take the opportunity to write a short story, and my stories would resonate with people. And when I was thinking about being a law professor, I'd done everything on the path to that. I just couldn't bring myself to write that last article, take that last step and go on the market. But I had this idea for a middle grade fantasy novel in my head. And my husband was like, you're so excited. Why don't you just try it? And so I did. It came pouring out of me. And I had no idea that I was even creative at that point. And my friends read it overnight. So I was like, okay, there really is something here. But it would take me 10 more years to publish my first novel, Love in Taipei. And in the meantime, I buried 5 novels, including The Vale, which is now coming out very soon.
Awesome. And, what was it like to actually publish that novel? Because obviously if you buried some, then you didn't think they were good enough, or maybe you had some feelings behind you that you were kind of struggling with, like having the courage to put it out there. And what was it like to actually get it out there and be like, I did it?
Yeah. So with Love in Taipei, that one was rejected at version 25. I wrote 25 drafts. Wow. And I think that, that was like the 6th book. And I'm like, I don't know what it takes to publish a novel. It was like definitely my low point. But my critique partners came around me and they're like, your stuff is good. There's just reasons you're not getting through the gate. And so, I scrapped it and I rewrote the whole thing from 1 point of view instead of 5 points of view, which made it a lot simpler and a lot tighter and also just deeper. It was too much story for one novel. I didn't know because what is a novel? I don't know what a novel is. So that ended up being from my girl Ever Wong's point of view. And so she narrates it, but because I did the work of telling the story from all these points of view, my other characters turned out really well-rounded. And so I think that contributed to the success of that book and making it all the way to the screen. And then for The Vale, I actually wrote it in 2015. It was my creative thesis in my MFA program at Vermont College of Fine Arts. And it's about a boy in an AI-generated virtual fantasy world. He's using AI generation tools to build this fantasy world that belongs all to him called The Vale, but it was too early for its time. So my agent at the time buried it. She's like, I don't know what this is. Can't get behind it. And so it never saw the light of day. It never even went to publishers. And I didn't know, I had no idea that it would ever get to come back like this. And so it's so exciting to be launching it now.
So in the book, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the boy that creates this AI world is neurodiverse, and that kind of plays into the story a good bit. And I'm also neurodivergent, so I kind of think this is kind of a cool a cool storyline. Can you talk a little bit about how that plays into the story?
Yeah. So the whole Lee family is neurodiverse, as you saw, mom and dad. They're just more comfortable at home, hanging out with themselves, with their inventions, making cool stuff. That's like their motto. We make cool stuff. And for Bran, it's so much easier to live in his virtual fantasy world because it's his. He controls it. everyone's like, everyone's of his own creation, and Nomley is his best friend. Nomley is the little elf that was the surrogate for the little brother he never had. But part of his journey is like, it's hard. Yeah, it's hard to live in the real world. It's hard to have human friendships and relationships. And in the story, there are messy human relationships. But it's worth it. In the end, like, it's worth it. You have a different type of relationship with a real person than you would with a virtual one. But at the same time, their neurodiversity is like part of their brilliance. Like, they are a brilliant family, but they don't know it. And part of their journey as a family is to recognize that they have this brilliance, and to come to take more ownership of their work and learn how to sell themselves instead of relying on other people.
Yeah. So in the story, well, let's go back a little bit, because you said you wrote this in 2015, which is for me, that's kind of shocking, because that was pre-ChatGPT, pre-DALL-E or Midjourney or any of these other tools that create things generatively with AI. But you came up with this concept of being able to generate an entire virtual world. Tell me a little bit about how your brain worked through that.
So I was working in the heart of Silicon Valley in venture capital as a lawyer, and I had a portfolio of AI startup companies. Eventually, I moved into our company's AI division. So I was seeing a lot of these technologies being incubated at a very early stage, and I was fascinated. And this powerful technology is already seeping into all aspects of our lives. They're in our smartphones and our smart home devices, our cars, and people didn't even know. And I could see that there was so much potential to this technology, but also there were pitfalls to it. I remember one year I was like, there are 2,000 AI startups pumping their technology into the economy. Anyone can use them, and they can be weaponized. They have multi-use. So, for example, lip reading technology could be used to spy for espionage. I think I mentioned this in the Vale. And so I wanted to share the word. I wanted to democratize access to this technology, because I'm like, this is life-changing. This is our future, and I want people to know about it, and I want them to know in an accessible way. And so, part of my hope is when people read The Veil, they will have an intuitive understanding of how AI generation works. In the end, there's a bit of magical realism to keep it evergreen. So, we have not hit the moonshot of Silicon Valley, which is artificial general intelligence. But I do take the story a little further. But now, like, publishing it today, people ask, like, did I have to revise a lot? And actually I didn't. I already designed a system that's very consistent with how the technology works. But I was able to design a clean AI system. So the leads only train the material on their own works and on non-copyrighted stories from the past. But I was able to lean on some of the words today that people are familiar with, like ChatGPT, like chatbots, artificial general intelligence. And so I use those words now, and I actually made the novel shorter because I didn't have to over-explain those things anymore. And I can say that Nomley is not a chatbot, and we aren't hitting this amorphous goal that we want. Like, actually, I can give it a name.
Awesome. So who is this book for exactly? Like, when you look at the audience, is it an every person's book, or more for young adults, or where's your audience?
Yeah. So I do think of it as an every person's book. My audience is definitely young people, but also the young at heart. One of the fun things about publishing with an indie press is I was able to do it like exactly the way I wanted to do it. Most middle grades in traditional publishing are just about the kid, but in this one, there's a family story. And that's actually like movies. Movies, like any Disney movie, they're called 4-quadrant because they appeal to adults, kids, boys and girls, and everyone in between, right? So the book itself is 4-quadrant in that sense. There's a strong parent storyline, there's a love triangle, as well as the kid story, as well as the Vale story. So I do hope that it will appeal to people of all audiences. But the technology, I definitely wrote it in a way that I want it to be as accessible as possible for as many people to understand as possible. So like an 8-year-old can pick it up and they'll be able to understand it. But an adult in Silicon Valley can also read it and be like, yes, this is accurate. Oh, I get it. That fills in some of the gaps in my knowledge.
So let me ask you this, because we've been talking about the Veil, but we haven't even said what is the Veil yet. I know you and I kind of like danced around the AI world, but what is the Veil exactly?
Yeah, so it is a virtual reality world that's been created by this family. It started when they had a miscarriage and mom realized she couldn't have any more children, and Brandon was devastated. So he got lost drawing pictures of this fantasy world with no sadness. He created this elf named Nomley that was his best friend. And eventually mom and dad notice. They wake up from their coma. They're not their actual coma, but they're like comatose, basically. They're grieving. They wake up, they see their kid, they see what their kid is doing and what he's created. And they have an idea, like, what if we turn this into like a virtual reality world for him to play in? And so they do that. And they use AI tools so that he can actually grow a blue forest, and he can have clover fields, and he can actually build a castle like in Minecraft. And he can live in this world, and his elves themselves grow smarter and smarter the more he talks to them and works with them and trains them, just the way AI is trained in reality. So it's a little bit like Winnie the Pooh and the 100-Acre Woods. It's Christopher Robin's, forest. It's like Minecraft. It's like Narnia meets Ready Player One, but for a middle grade audience.
And what happens in the story that kind of like, is unexpected for the Liu family?
So there is a story. The story goes back and forth between the real world and the Vale. In the real world, the Liu family has fallen on hard times. Part of that is their neurodiversity. They just don't know how to pitch themselves. They don't know how to talk about what they are capable of. Mm-hmm. And but Bran hasn't given up hope in what they can do. He knows that their work is genius. He knows the Vale is genius. And so he enters the Vale in a high stakes competition to win an investment for $10 million. He doesn't tell his parents because they are absolutely against this. They're like, that's ridiculous. But he enlists the help of their family close friend, Uncle Roy, who's also the business partner who tries to sell their works for them. But as he's trying to showcase the Vale, things start to go wrong. Like this wizard appears out of nowhere. And you learn later that this wizard actually has a real world analog. And so while Bran thinks the Vale is falling apart with all these glitches, which is threatening his standing in the competition, what we learn over time is actually there's more going on to the Vale than meets the eye.
Awesome. Yeah. And, when it comes to like creating the Vale and going through the process of how it has evolved using the stories and the imagination, I guess, of Bran as he's going through it, how does that relate to the real world when it comes to AI today and what you see going on with Midjourney or ChatGPT or all the other ones that are out there?
Right. Well, it's really inputs define the outputs. And so with all these AI tools out there, they've trained on so much of the data in the world, right? They train on the corpus of the internet. There's YouTube videos, and they train on our voices. So like our home devices, I don't know if those are training on the voices at home. I hope they're not, but they might be. But they draw on the world. And so when people blame these algorithms or they blame the outputs for being biased, for example, that's not the algorithm. That's not the technology. It's actually the inputs. So there was a headline a couple of years ago where a big tech company created a human resources algorithm to try to weed through like the millions of resumes they get. And it wasn't correlating women with leadership roles. And it wasn't because the algorithm was biased against women. It was because the underlying data was that way. Like women weren't getting leadership roles. They weren't getting their resumes weren't getting selected. And that's part of what happens with the Vale. Like it's really all the inputs define what the Vale is. And in the end, that's the biggest safety feature, is that the Vale is good, that the Lees are very careful how they trained it, what they trained it with, and they themselves were training it, and they are good people. So a big theme in the story for me is that ethical people make ethical technology, and I want to see more ethical people going into this field because it's a very powerful one, and it needs to be shaped by good people.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we're on the verge of the next industrial revolution, if you will, and how we build the algorithms, how we define the input, and, how clean the data is going in, it's going to make a huge difference of what you get back. Yeah. And, we've already, in some of the cybersecurity research that I've done, I've already heard so many stories of people like trying to seed with bad data in order to, sabotage the results coming out of certain AI tools. So I think it's really good how you incorporated that into the storyline about seeding it with, ethics and morality and good things to have a good world coming back out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about like the journey between writing and creating books and film.
Yeah, so I've always loved movies too. There was one year, I'm not Catholic, but there was one year for Lent, I decided to give up fantasy novels and movies because I was like, I could tell I was just too obsessed. And now I've obviously embraced it fully. So watching movies and TV shows for me is research. It was really fun to adapt Love Boat Taipei into Love in Taipei. And that's really where I learned everything. I was an executive producer and I wanted to learn everything. So I'm there from the beginning to the end, from selecting the writer all the way to post-production when you're editing the final cut together. And I was a good student. So I interviewed everybody. What do you do? Like, how does like your role contribute? When you see all those names at the end of a movie, they all have a role. They've all touched the film in some way. And that's like mind-boggling. But at the same time, I was like, it kind of demystified the process. It's actually just a really big project management like experience. Yeah. Lots of moving parts, talent, like can be, there's you have to handle, manage and work with talent sensitively. But really it is project management. And it actually ended up being the three areas of my life. There's creative storytelling, finance, and technology. There's a lot of technology involved with all the cameras and lights and all. And I guess for me, I don't know a lot about those. I know enough to be dangerous, but I think being comfortable around technology meant I wasn't scared. I wasn't scared of all this equipment that we needed to use and get right and things we need to figure out. So for The Veil, I took it a step further. I was interested in moving into directing, which I don't actually see as that different from writing, because as a writer, you pretty much like describe on the page everything. For me, it's describing everything that's in my head, how the characters look, how they interact, what their expressions are, their emotions. And that's what a director does. A director tells the actor, like, oh, in this scene, you are angry because you just had this fight, and yet you're trying not to show it because you have anger management issues and you're working on that, right? So I actually tell the actors exactly what I would write on the page as an author. And so that's a lot of fun, and getting to see each story like that's just been in my head out in the world and become a reality is like nothing else. It's a miracle.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. I work in media as well. So, when you see all that goes into making a film or making a TV series and all the different episodes and how they line up, and then when you shoot or knowing how to, when you're going to shoot doesn't necessarily dictate the storyline. It's actually very different, actually, and then when it all comes together at the end, it's just like, I don't know, it's an exhilarating feeling to see it all kind of just come together and your creation be there. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about like directing for, you said it's a lot like, writing. It's very similar because you're putting it together. But how does that compare when you're directing a short film versus like being executive producer on, something for Netflix?
Right. It's surprisingly a short film takes almost as much work as a long film. It's just that you don't film as many days, but all the setup, all the takedown, like all the preparation, it's very, very similar because you're still got all your scenes. Like with a short film, you can try to have fewer locations, which can save on budget. I think the fun of a short film is like a shorter time commitment because you don't have to edit for so long. And so you can take a risk. I was able to take risks and bring people on, and you find out like, who you jibe with, who you like to work with. And we had such really wonderful, talented people in the short film. I think also because I had it was my project and I had final cut, and that was a very different experience than if you're like looking over someone else's shoulder. And with Love in Taipei, that was my very first movie. So I was very deferential to everyone else involved, and just really thankful that there were so many talented people working on that film as well. But I made really wonderful friends. One of them, Ashley Liao, was my star. Her mom, Julie Liao, was on set with me, and she is now one of the executive producers of The Veil Origins and a dear friend. So I feel like I've met so many wonderful people through this process, and I just keep collecting more and more of them.
Yeah. And we didn't mention this, but The Veil Origins is a prequel to the book. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So it's the miscarriage story. It's a story of mom losing the baby and Bran creating the world of The Veil.
Tell me a little bit about what the future is of Bran and the family post The Veil.
Ooh, great question. No one's asked me this, and maybe I might have spoilers. My niece just read it and asked if there would be a sequel. So I can start to think about what that could be. Well, I don't want to spoil the ending, but Bran does learn to live in the real world, and he kind of makes a conscious choice that he's going to learn to live in the real world. He met a girl, Piper Longfellow, who's everything he's not. She's well spoken. She's brilliant, and he is brilliant too. But she's really at ease in her own skin. She comes from a billionaire family, so that's a little intimidating for him. But she is like him in a lot of ways. She's probably neurodiverse too. She loves to solve problems. She's a hacker. And he loves the way she sees the world. So he spends a lot of time in her social media, and initially not really talking to her, but just admiring her photos and the things that she captures. And through that, he does get to know her in a certain way. And by the end of the story, they're able to connect. And so I can see a sequel involving more of the two of them together on some kind of adventure. And then The Veil itself is also having an adventure. And so it might be a fun way to figure out how to bring those together.
Oh yeah, I think that'd be fantastic. Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it. And so with this release, you also have Kindle version, the physical version, the audiobook. Tell me about how putting all that together, lining it all up, and the project management behind it. It seems like it, and the short film. It just seems like a lot.
It was a lot. Oh my goodness, I had no idea it was going to be so much work. We actually started the short film first before I had the book to it was, I was thinking about being a director and I was told, oh, you should do a short film. And I thought through all of my stories that I had out there, and this was the most discreet piece. And I thought, oh, it's so cool if you could show how to go back and forth between the real world and the fantasy world, which is animation. So it, it had triple effect. It was one, my directorial debut. Two, it was a great proof of concept for how could you do this? Like, how could you go back and forth? What would that look like aesthetically? And then three, it supports the book launch because we have it coming out at the same time. But yeah, I did feel like this weird, I'm quadrupling down on one story. And I'm ADHD also. So it was very weird to like not be working on multiple things. I could only work on the Vale. I was commenting on the film cut. I was editing the novel with my publisher. And then the audiobook, because I'm working with a startup, I ended up project managing the audiobook too. So I was the director partly, but I also like really trusted the actor Matt Yang King, who's fabulous. He was in Avatar: The Last Airbender and a bunch of other wonderful shows. So he was my narrator. He's very talented, and I feel like you would want both experiences because the book is illustrated with 40 different illustrations. And I was working on that. I was the art director for that, working with these talented illustrators to create these images. And then I was working with him to read the audiobook. And then, we're thinking about the feature-length film too now. So I'm a part of this accelerator in Silicon Valley or in Hollywood, where I'm working on writing the full-length script. And so, yeah, it has just been Vale, and nonstop. So I was glad to like finally close the book, and it's done. There's nothing else we could do about it except launch it. And then the audiobook is done. The short film is almost done. We are wrapping animation, and I'm about to go on tour. I'll be all around the country. So if there's any listeners, take a look at my website, my events page, abigailhingwen.com, and you'll see where I'm going to be around the country. But San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, Cleveland, probably Columbus or Cincinnati, New York City, Boston, DC, and Austin, Texas. So, and Tucson, Arizona. And I'm sure there's more coming. And if you want to have me come out, let me know. Just reach out. So yeah, I'm literally like about to start that launch. And then after that, I hope to turn to the feature film, and I have another novel that I'm supposed to be writing for HarperCollins. So that'll be next on my plate.
Awesome. That sounds so fantastic. And and I encourage everybody that's listening to go ahead and purchase the book. I've already pre-ordered the audiobook, waiting for that to launch, which we'll be launching at actually the day this goes live. So hopefully our listeners are doing that. How can the listeners help you out with the launch and with the things that are going on, and connect with you online if they have questions or want to pick up a copy of the book?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for asking. So part of pre-orders are actually the most critical thing, or orders, since like it's just launched, but ordering the hard copy, especially supporting your local independent bookstores or Barnes & Noble. Those booksellers really know their communities, and they put books directly into the hands of readers that not only is more of the same, which is what an algorithm would give you, but challenges you or introduces you to things that you may not know about, and I think are incredibly valuable. So supporting your local independent bookstores, Barnes & Noble, and grabbing a copy, and then spreading the word. Really just talk about the book. Tell your librarians to stock their library. Tell your school to think about a school visit, and having the kids like read it. There's actually a discussion guide in the back to talk about the technology and neurodiversity and the adventures and the stories that are used to train the Vale. So yeah, helping to get word out as much as possible. But for launch week especially, we would love your help with the pre-orders. And I should mention that we have a wonderful campaign. So we had these amazing, cute stickers. I'm showing them here. I know people can't see them. But if you go on my website, you can see there's like a form. You can submit your receipt and we'll mail you one of these stickers.
Awesome. That sounds fantastic. Abigail, thanks so much for coming on the show and telling us all about this. And thank you for putting together the Vale. Looking forward to listening to it coming up this week. So thanks so much.
Thanks so much, John.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Please go to geekleader.com to learn more about what this guest is up to, click on their links, and connect with them online. I would also greatly appreciate it if you could leave me a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. And make sure you've subscribed if you haven't already. And if you feel so inclined, you can leave me a tip by going to geekleader.com/tip.